There are moments that don't announce themselves. They don't send warnings ahead. They arrive quietly, dressed in ordinary clothes, sitting inside courtrooms and legal documents and sentences read aloud by judges who don't know the names they are speaking carry decades of weight behind them. For most people watching from the outside, this was a legal proceeding. For Nancy Guthrie, it was something else entirely. It was the moment her family's story took a turn that no amount of faith, experience, or published wisdom could have fully prepared her for. Her son-in-law had been sentenced, and the woman who had spent 20 years teaching the world how to grieve was now sitting inside a kind of loss that had no chapter in any book she had ever written. Welcome back to Cold Case History. I am going to walk you through every detail of this case, the footage, the forensics, the suspect behavior, the DNA, and the digital evidence trail. And I am going to do it the way we always do it here, with the facts, with the victims at the center, and with a commitment to asking the hard questions that this investigation demands. If you are new here, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. We cover every update on cases like this one the moment they break. And trust me, this one is not finished breaking yet. Let's begin at the beginning. To understand what a moment like that really means for a woman like Nancy Guthrie, you have to go back much further than any courthouse. You have to go back to a hospital room, then to another one, then to two small graves, and a life rebuilt from what was left afterward. Because Nancy did not arrive at her public ministry through study or ambition or a decision made in a season of comfortable living. She arrived there through the kind of loss that most people never experience once, let alone twice. Her daughter Hope was born with Zellweger syndrome, a rare and fatal metabolic condition that attacks the body before it ever has a real chance to develop. Hope lived for 199 days. Her son Gabriel came next, diagnosed with the same condition before he was even born, and he lived for 183 days. Nancy and her husband David knew both times what was coming. They made the choice both times to step toward it anyway, to hold those children with everything they had, and to love them completely and without conditions through every single day that existed. There is nothing theoretical about that kind of love. It is not a concept or a philosophy. It is a decision made in full awareness of cost, which is the most honest and the most costly kind of love there is. That experience did not leave Nancy unchanged. It could not. When you live inside that particular quality of loss, something fundamental shifts. You stop speaking in comfortable approximations. You begin to understand that presence itself is a form of service, that showing up for someone inside their worst season, without trying to fix it or rush it or dress it in language that makes it easier to look at, is one of the most important things one human being can offer another. What Nancy did with that shift was build a ministry around it. She wrote books that found their way into hospital waiting rooms and darkened bedrooms in the hands of people who had stopped sleeping. She spoke at conferences and appeared on platforms and engaged directly with thousands of people who were trying to find stable ground after the worst moments of their lives had removed it. Her work did not operate at a comfortable distance from suffering. She returned to it deliberately, year after year, because she believed with everything she had that grief does not have to be walked through alone, and that honesty inside it is more useful than any comfort that arrives before it's earned. Her surviving children, her son Matt and her daughter Anna, grew up inside the specific atmosphere that kind of life creates. A home built on faith, on love, and also on the long shadow cast by siblings who never grew old enough to be in the same room with them. They understood from early on that loss was not something their family avoided talking about. It was something their family had decided to transform into purpose. Anna eventually stepped out of that home and into her own life, her own marriage, her own version of a quieter future. The man she married came into the Guthrie family the way most people do, through time, through meals, through the gradual accumulation of presence that eventually becomes trust. He was not a stranger at the edges of the family. He was embedded inside it. He sat at their table. He stood in their spaces. He was someone Nancy had extended genuine love to, not as a formality, not as an obligation, but because he was her daughter's husband and because that meant something real to her. And that is the detail that matters most when trying to understand what unfolded, because the measure of how deeply something breaks a person is almost always tied directly to how real the trust was before the breaking. The trust here was real. For a period of time, from the outside, nothing appeared to be wrong. The family continued moving forward in the way that families do. Nancy's public work kept growing. Anna and her husband built their life in the relative privacy that suited them both. There were no visible fractures, no public signals, no indication that anything beneath the surface was under pressure. But according to accounts that would eventually come to light, something had been building underneath that quiet for longer than anyone outside the family circle was aware of. The early signs, the kind that are almost never readable in real time, had begun to accumulate in the background. When they became impossible to contain, the break was not gradual. It did not ease into visibility. It arrived with the particular force of things that have been held back too long. The moment a family member becomes the subject of a criminal investigation changes the shape of everything around it immediately. It does not wait for anyone to be prepared. Questions flood in before the information does. Questions about what was happening beneath what was visible, about what could or should have been noticed, about where the line sits between extending trust and choosing not to see. Charges were filed against Anna's husband. The proceedings that followed were not brief and not uncomplicated because these things almost never are when the person at the center of them has been woven deeply into the fabric of a family and a community for years. If you're still here, subscribe, because cases like this only work when people stay, and tell us where you're watching from. I love seeing my global family represent. Drop your country or city in the comments. For Nancy, the weight of that was of a category she had not previously encountered. Every framework she had built over 2 decades of grief ministry, every language she had developed to help others move through devastating seasons, every conviction she held about facing pain directly rather than softening it with prettier words, all of it was now being asked to hold something it had not been constructed to hold. Because this was not the grief of a diagnosis, not the cruel and impersonal machinery of a rare genetic condition. This was the grief of betrayal, of a trust extended in love and returned in harm, of memories that now had to be revisited with information no one had ever asked to carry. And that is a different category of pain entirely. It does not only ask you to grieve. It asks you to question your own perception, to wonder whether what you trusted was ever fully what it appeared to be, whether what felt real was real, whether your love was being received the way it was being given. That questioning is its own form of suffering, and one that does not resolve on any predictable schedule. Nancy made no detailed public statement addressing the charges or the proceedings. The family maintained a silence that was consistent and in the circumstances entirely understandable, not as an act of avoidance, but as the only real response available to people who are absorbing something privately before they have any capacity to speak about it publicly. The sentence was eventually handed down. The legal process reached its formal conclusion. Documents were filed, terms were recorded, the courtroom emptied. But for Anna, the sentence was not a conclusion in any of the ways that matter most. It was the official closing of a chapter she had entered with genuine hope and arrived at the end of through a series of events no one had foreseen or chosen. For Nancy, standing beside her daughter in the aftermath of that moment, it was a demand of a different kind. Not the demand of ministry, not the demand of a public role, but the specific and private demand of being a mother inside her child's grief, while also navigating her own version of it. Those who have studied the secondary trauma that ripples through families after situations like this have noted that the psychological work involved is not simply emotional processing. It is a full reconstruction of identity, the slow and unglamorous work of separating who you are from what someone else did, of finding new solid ground after the ground you were standing on turned out to be something other than solid. That work does not happen quickly and cannot be hurried by anyone who is not the person doing it. Nancy did not stop her ministry. She kept showing up, kept meeting people in the worst seasons of their lives, kept doing the work she had always believed in, even while sitting inside her own version of loss that she had not yet translated into anything public or purposeful or offered to an audience. That says something about the depth of her conviction, about the kind of faith that is not performed or contingent, about what it actually means to believe the things you have spent your adult life telling others are true. Anna's path ahead belongs entirely to her. The decisions about what she carries, what she eventually releases, what she allows to define her going forward, those are hers alone to make. But she grew up watching someone transform the most devastating losses imaginable into something purposeful without pretending even for a moment that they were not devastating first. She has had, her entire life, a close and consistent example of what it looks like to survive something unsurvivable while holding on to both honesty and love at the same time. That is not nothing. In the wake of something like this, it is actually a great deal more than most people have available to them. The questions this story leaves behind are not ultimately about legal guilt or public character. They are the quieter and harder questions that find every family eventually in one form or another. About what love requires when it is tested by something it did not consent to. About where loyalty ends and self-preservation has to begin. About how a person holds on to hope when everything immediately in front of them is making that holding feel close to impossible. No verdict reaches those questions. No sentence settles them. They live instead in the daily, largely invisible work of people trying to remain whole inside the aftermath of something that came very close to taking that wholeness from them. Nancy Guthrie has said, in many forms and across many years of conversation, that grief and faith are not opposites, that the presence of one does not require the absence of the other. She has built her entire life around that conviction. And now, quietly, privately, without a platform or a book deal or a conference appearance attached to it, she is living inside the proof of it again. If this story stayed with you, you know what to do. Subscribe to Cold Case History right now and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Every week we go deep on cases like this one, the full picture, the facts, the questions the headlines missed, and the people at the center who deserve to be remembered as more than a set of court documents. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to go further, check out our other episodes linked on screen right now. We will see you in the next one.